Hi everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about what sort of things I as a history major look for in good historical fiction. I know this is like a super subjective topic and like there's no objective quantification that you can have for like what makes a good historical fiction, what makes a bad historical fiction, and that my standards for good and bad are not representative of everyone. But I think that it's good to have like an understanding of like what good history is, like historical fiction is, to someone who studies history. In my major, I definitely have more of a focus on women's history, colonial history, and East Asian history, specifically looking at the Japanese colonial period in Korea and sort of the after effects of that. So I've looked at Korea, I've looked at Taiwan, and I've looked at Japan. And these are the sorts of things that I study regularly. I've also looked at Mary Beard and her sort of how she writes. I've looked at historiography, and one of my key areas of sort of interest in history is how it's actually taught and how we can lessen trauma within history, like for people learning it. Which is a super important topic and I think very relevant today, especially since history is becoming more like present. So like 9/11 is considered history now, and that's really weird to me, even though it was 20 years ago. Like, that's strange, right? But yeah, the way we talk about history is really important, and the way that history is portrayed is really important. So I thought this would be a good way to like connect those ideas and like really get people thinking about what sort of history is important history, what sort of history is the history that we want to read and understand. The first thing I want to talk about is what my favourite historical fiction is, like what sort of historical fiction I like to read and what I really enjoy. So my favourite historical fiction novel is called Salt to the Sea by Rita Sepetys, and that is a novel set in 1945 following 4 different individuals around the Wilhelm Gustloff tragedy. So we've got a Lithuanian girl, a Prussian man, a Polish girl, and a German soldier. And these are all 4 people who have very, very different perspectives about Hitler and the war and what sort of is going on. So perspectives on Russia, perspectives on Germany and England, and all that sort of thing. So this novel is my favourite for a number of reasons. I'd love to be able to speak. So it's very lyrically written. In terms of historical accuracy, you can tell that Rita Sepetys is like really big on having accurate data, accurate history, accurate sort of representations of what is going on. And you can see that she's not holding back from sort of both criticizing actions that we nowadays would not consider to be correct, so criticizing the treatment of Poles, and sort of that sort of thing. But you can also see how she's using those perspectives to really hone in and make it more realistic. So Salt to the Sea is a really good example of really good historical fiction. And I've also read one of Rita Sepetys' other books, Between Shades of Grey, which is set in a Russian camp in... So that... Where is it? I don't remember. Anyway, it's set in a Russian camp. Now it's bothering me. Where is it set? For a history major, I don't know a lot of history. Serbia. It's a camp in Serbia, which is sort of a link in with Salt to the Sea, which I really enjoyed. I also have Rita Sepetys' other book, Between Shades of... No, that's not the one. I have her other one, The Fountains of Silence, I think it's called, set during the Spanish dictatorship, and I'm super keen to read that. So I think Rita Sepetys is a really fantastic author. I really would recommend Rita Sepetys if you want to get into historical fiction or if you're looking for new recommendations, because there's also a trend for me with historical fiction where I like stories about spies. I like The Alice Network by Kate Quinn, for example, is about spies. I really enjoyed that novel. I thought it was very well done, very well written, very realistic, and it draws upon a real sort of event. So the Alice Network was a real network of women who would spy during World War One, and I thought it was really interesting how she linked that in with sort of the fictional aspects of what was going on in the book, the trauma that Eve went through, and sort of how that all links together with the story in 1947. I also really enjoyed When We Left Cuba by Chanel Clayton, which is another spy story where she is trying to take down Fidel Castro. Obviously, we know history did not happen, but it was a really beautifully written story. Now, these are not eras that I know a lot about. They're not my specialty areas. That's probably why I like reading them so much. I have tried to look for books that are set in periods and times that I'm really interested in, but there's none that like jump out at me. The only one that really jumps out is Pachinko, which I have been meaning to read for like 2 years and just haven't. I will read it this year. You got me on tape. I will read it this year. But that's the only book that like even seems good that is related to one of my sort of areas of interest. So it's very difficult for me to find good historical fiction. Because not only am I looking for historical sort of, not accuracy, but like the link to historical references and stuff like that. But I'm also really into sort of the atmosphere that is created. So I really like lyrical writing with historical fiction. I really enjoy, well, not necessarily lyrical, but sort of like vivid. I want to feel like I'm there. I want to feel like I'm in all the tragedy. Which is where I struggle with a lot of books. So I actually struggle a lot with classics. Even though they're set usually in, well, the ones I have to read for uni, because my other major is English, usually 1800s, 1700s, 1800s, maybe 1900s literature, and I find that I really struggle with it because it's not written with the sense of immersing yourself. It was written with the assumption that you already knew what was going on because you were reading it at the time. Like, it wasn't historical fiction, it was just, this is what's going on, this is what I'm commenting on. So it was they're very difficult for me to read. There are very few that I can actually read and digest and enjoy. The Picture of Dorian Gray is one of them. Beloved is another one by Toni Morrison. Absolutely fantastic book, definitely recommend, especially if you love lyrical writing and if you enjoyed The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr. That's another fantastic historical fiction book, set slavery in the United States. Definitely check those out. It also goes on to think about what sort of historical fiction that I have on my TBR and what I'm looking to read soon. So I have The Mercies, I have A Gentleman in Moscow, I have The Huntress by Kate Quinn, The Phantoms of Silence by Rita Petties, The Paris Secret by Natasha Lester, which I was gifted. That's not something I bought for myself, so I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about that. Let me just look. I have Outlander. Not really sure how I feel about that one. I do enjoy the TV show. Like, historical accuracy is not really great, but like, I really enjoy sort of the romance aspect of it. So I don't think I'm going to be reading it for like historical accuracy. There's also Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. Super keen to read that. I just need to get it together and like get in the headspace for it because I suck. I really suck when it comes to that sort of thing. I think that's it. I don't know. I also do want to do a reread of The Book Thief. I've already read it. I read it in grade 9. I loved it. Really fantastic book for a lot of reasons. It's not really related to the historical accuracy or like historicism that really interests me about that book. It's like the actual craft itself. Which I think is really good. So that's sort of a conversation I want to have about that. But yeah, speaking of conversations I want to have, I'm probably going to turn this into a series of me talking about like historical fiction and like history and how it interacts with literature. So if there's anything you'd like me to talk about or like any specific recommendations you'd like me to give, suggest them in the comments below. I am super keen to take your guys' ideas everything's collaborative in my mind, so like please hit me up, let me know what you think. I have a couple of ideas already in mind for what I'd like to do for this sort of series, so please let me know like what you think. Anyone that I've mentioned in this video I will be linking down below, because I love them. And yeah, I hope you check out the rest of my videos, and I'll see you probably next week. Bye!